So it's weird. It's hard to find, I'm sure as a parent, you think of that as well, the balance between, your children, growing up in this problem-free existence versus challenges like 11 years old having to, be in a house and probably take a train 200 miles on your own, like that built character in you. So
yeah, but I think that, and I think this is the part where the role of parents has changed so much, right? I think still, right, if you can think about back in the day, the relationship with our parents was more hierarchical. At the end of the day, you listen to your parents, right? My relationship with my children is very different. It's more like friends. When we play video games, they're much better than me, so I have to defer to them. They have to carry me because otherwise we'll lose, right? So I think the world has changed. But it's different, right? And the difference being that actually they are more natural digital stewards than perhaps we are. We can give them guidance. We can give them maybe ethics and morals and values, but actually the natural space to navigate in this space is maybe something we can learn from them more, because it's no longer about the physical strength, which is what used to be true for generations, right? So what is it that we give our children? Because it's not necessarily jobs per se, because the job that you're doing today is not going to be the job that your children will be doing, because the world is going to be entirely different. My oldest son basically works for a blockchain company, right? He's a smart contract developer, for instance, which is very different. A job that didn't exist maybe even 5 or 6 years ago, as an example, right? And how do you get there is exposure, sure, but at the same time, there's a lot more guardrails in the way that we raise our children today, and that's always a challenge because we never had these guardrails, and now they're everywhere. And how do you navigate that in a world that actually needs our children to learn more about how things are? And which is, again, coming back to Web3 gaming, why that's interesting, because play is how we learn. And we used to learn through physical play, and we still do. But actually, virtual play, I think, is a way in which we can engage with the world. How do we learn about other cultures around the world? How do we learn about, our differences, for instance, right? If you think about it from a global perspective, we can learn about our differences by engaging with people around the world. I think one of the tragedies that we're experiencing, whether from a geopolitical standpoint, is that we're actually separating each other. We're trying to create walls between each other, at least from a political standpoint. But then when you think from a culture perspective, actually, we don't do that. I know many Americans who, would consider Chinese food as their favorite food, for instance, who have many friends that are actually Chinese, right? So while you may have a disagreement perhaps with a government, you shouldn't have a disagreement with that culture or the people. And I think that cross-understanding is really important. And I think that's what the internet promised and initially developed before it became a walled garden and became an echo chamber of things that perhaps wasn't good. So I think Web3 has a potential to change that in a pretty big way. And I think gaming is a really interesting one because children are not just going to be learning about other cultures, they're also going to learn about value and financial systems and property rights and democracy.
My 5-year-old is playing games a lot. He's stealing his mom's phone and he's playing games. And I keep telling him to stop playing games. And then I realized that I used to love games. And I used to play them on my Apple II computer and Castle Wolfenstein and all these games.
Castle Wolfenstein. Wow.
Come on, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that came back to me, I think, after I was talking to you. I was like, wow. And then I realized how much I loved games and how that's how humans love to play and learn. And so I'm watching him doing it, and I'm trying to remember, wait a second, that was...
Well, I think the big thing now I would always recommend if you can, right, is because first of all, games are multiplayer today, so it's become social. The engagement layer is different.
Right.
You play with friends. So, you wouldn't go, for instance, to a football pitch halfway through and say, time for dinner, or you let them finish the game. It's not just the game. It's standing with the rest of his friends. If he leaves the game now, he's letting down his fellow friends or members of that particular team or squad that he's playing with. But because we don't understand it, we only see the screen. We don't understand what's happening inside that screen because we're not engaged in this world. As a result, we might say, wow, you're all addicted to this, right? And of course, we have to be mindful. But how do you solve problems of sort of digital attention? Only if you understand it yourself, right? And so what I typically tell sort of parents who struggle with this is you have to engage in the world. You don't have to be the player. In fact, you can be a bad player, right? But if you're in there or if you watch them play, then you'll learn about it. And then you can understand, and then you can have a real conversation around this. I gave this example, I think, to a group of parents. Maybe this was, before Web3, and we were talking about sort of, digital addiction and so on. I said, look, and many of the moms struggled with this because they would tell their kids basically, stop playing games, it's time for dinner and all that stuff. And And then they just shut down the computer and then the kid goes to the dinner table and he's like all pissed off and angry. And then, it just leads to fights and it's like, it's a game that did this. But the example I would give them is, imagine you're in the last 5 or 10 minutes of this climax of this movie or TV series you're watching. And then someone just says dinner time and you say, I just need some more time. And they just shut off the TV and say, come now. What is your mood going to be? Right? Your mood's going to be bad. But if you don't know what's happening, then, you have to tell them, okay, come after you finish this, right? Make sure you finish your level or, finish that goal, whatever it is. If you understand the construct of what the game is like, you can set the boundary and then he'll be able to do this. If you say, okay, I want to play a game, well, you can play the game within this construct. Make sure, don't make it time-based necessarily because you don't know how long the time may go. You might say, okay, just play 2 matches, for instance, or whatever that is, right? Then when you understand that, the relationship becomes much easier. Not only do they appreciate that you understand what's going on, at the same time, they also can finish off what they're doing and have a sense of completeness before they come to dinner or do other activities. We do this in the physical world, right? And I think this is the part where the generational understanding is lacking because many, let's call it older parents, don't engage in the world of gaming. They somehow think, well, games is games, I don't do that, right? But we don't do this for sports. Right? We may not be as good as our kids in football or in baseball or basketball, but we do watch them. We do know how to play the sport. We understand the rules, and therefore we can engage. I think as parents, we have to do the same for games.
I think you're right. And we don't because we just look at it and we say it's just like every other game and we just think it's wrong and it's bad and it's the problem, but we don't understand it. That's their experience.
3.4 billion people play games. They can't all be wrong.
Hey, it's Brian Rose, founder of the DeFi Academy. I've told you my 4-week crypto bootcamp is amazing, but don't take my word for it. This is what my students are saying.
The DeFi Academy was an amazing experience for me. It took me totally out of my comfort zone.
In this course, I was challenged, I was held accountable, and pushed to do things that honestly weren't always easy.
It's been phenomenal, and I can't believe we're already up on our 4 weeks. It has flown by.
Going through this DeFi accelerator by far was one of the best courses I've taken.
You do this course, you really get into the nitty-gritty of the activities that will make you comfortable with decentralized finance.
Thank you so much to Brian and everyone at London Real and the DeFi Academy for even putting together an amazing course like this.
Anybody else that wants to do it, please sign up. It is well worth the money.